What is going on, everybody? My name is Jeff Lightsy Jr. here with the Black Boss channel. Thank you guys for tuning in. I have a special guest here with us. It is the one and only Dr. Phil Valentine. Dr. Valentine, how are you?
I'm well, beloved, and yourself.
I am really, really good, Dr. Valentine. I was telling you before we got started, I am so thankful that you are here. I'm really looking forward to this conversation that we're going to have. And I know that you are going to enlighten everyone that is able to listen in and tune in. I know they're going to walk away a lot smarter people, I'd say.
I hope so.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now, Dr. Valentine, for those who may or may not know who you are, just kind of give the people a brief background of who you are, what work that you do, and what you have studied. And
Well, I am a doctor of naturopathic medicine along with my wife. We focus on the hygienic science, and my doctorate is in hygienic science from the Life Science Institute of Texas, which is now folded over to the Fit for Life College of Natural Health in Canada.
mm,
And I've been practicing, and I'm a doctor of metaphysics as well. Um, Metaphysical psychology, that is. And I'm a lecturer. I'm also a certified hypnotherapist. I am part of the Black College of Black Psychologists. Um, I've been doing vaccination exemptions and teaching people mostly about health regarding the vaccinations. I've been, I've had the pleasure of delivering five children, five babies, including my granddaughter. I mean,
mm.
it's been a lot of, I don't know where to begin or end with it because, I've had the privilege of having been chosen by the Pan Africanist Congress of Azania to speak at the UN, United Nations.
Mm.
I'm also I am also a doctor of divinity. I have an international ecclesiastical license, so to speak, under the Hague Convention. I've done, a lot of different things that been lecturing mostly. I have the University of Commission Sciences, which you see as our link that's there. We also have an 800 number. I forgot to give you that. If you wanted to deal with our services, that's 800-847-1291, 800-847-1291. We are presently teaching at our university online. Our classes began just last week. We are dealing with late registration, and we are kind of backed up in doing the vaccination exemption packages. But you can call that number for any of our services, which we do also marriage counseling, and it's a spate of different things that the service as the community needs.
Now, as you see, Dr. Valentine is well credentialed, well equipped, and offers a number of services. And that's why this conversation is going to be super important tonight. Now, Dr. Valentine, I want to start off here. What drawn me to you is that I saw you speak about, and you spoke a little bit about how you offer relationship services, and I saw this clip. I think it was footage that wasn't actually used in Hidden Colors. You were featured in one of the Hidden Color films directed by Tariq Nasheed, of course, and you spoke about the men and the women and basically how there's like some things going on as far as the feminist movement. Just Dr. Valentine, if you can for just a brief second, talk to me about the feminist movement and that what's taking place in America, but specifically how it affects the black family or black people.
Well, I forgot to mention also that I'm an author along with my wife. My book is
Mm-hmm.
called The Wounded Womb, which I wrote about 35 years ago. I perfected it and re released it back in 2005 or 2006. I can't remember, it's so far back. In that book, I spoke some 30 years ago. Everything you see happening with this gentleman called Kevin Samuels, trying to let our sisters understand the ramifications of what feminism has done to our community, how it has completely ravished our community, destroyed our families, and people don't see that this was psychological warfare from the beginning.
Mm.
When it was implemented by a woman who essentially became the poster child for it, her name being Gloria Steinem. At the time, most people didn't know, and I was trying to let them know that a group called Red Stockings, which was the name of a feminist organization, outed her as a CIA agent,
Wow.
and that she was recruited when she went to college. I forgot, I think it was Vassar or one of the other colleges, but she was recruited right out of college. And she, along with Audre Lorde and a number of other women who were pretty much in a high class position, they weren't actually poor women, but they were actually going after the poor women in our society to tell them that these rich women were actually suffering under men's oppression. They were
Wow.
living up in Fifth Avenue. They were living in the life, I mean, a life that most of us, the working nine to fivers, could only dream of. But they're the ones who started this, and Rockefeller actually financed what became known as the gender feminism or Amazonian feminism, the one you see today as third wave, second wave, fourth wave, and all these waves of toxicity that have come into our community. And what happened was uh, after Rockefeller released that particular poison into our community, the young people, the young girls and the young boys, not only did it destroy our family and have our women to the tune of 73 to 75% being a single parent household, but the incarceration of males, and mostly black, but definitely whites all across the board. It was an attack against the authority of men.
Hmm.
And the authority of men, most people don't like to hear that anymore because that's some kind of you're they're now monitoring all our speeches. We have certain words that we can and cannot say. Well, really, I don't give a damn about that. I'll say what I have to say to them. And what happened was that the feminist organization began to destroy the not only the education system, but began to pollute the political system as well.
Mm.
And what in the education system, they began to feminize the education system. Outcome based, what they call outcome based education, no longer dealt with the male authority. They essentially feminized the entire system to the tune where boys couldn't find themselves in a system that was actually tailored towards girls. And
Wow.
so they began to regress and drop out to the tune of 65%. At one time, the Post talked about boys across America during the height of the gender feminist movement through the 80s into the 90s. They were dropping out of school to the tune of 65%. Now you see more women in there, but most of these things that they're taking up, most of these PhDs they're taking up, are not really on the level of what it is that men take up, which is the engineering, what they call I forgot the names of the math, engineering, science, and so forth, and the STEMs they call them, so science, technology, economics, or electricity, or something to that, or economics and math. That's the STEM. The STEMs were the ones that paid the most, but the women were very few of them really cultivated or actually moved into those fields. So they started complaining about the fact that women were not getting paid the same as men. Well, they weren't taking the same jobs, same dangerous jobs as men.
Mm-hmm.
So there was this incredible distrust that was fed into our society at in shows such as Oprah and Jenny Jones and the rest of these were highly feminized, and so all of it was about blaming men, no more accountability for women's actions. The boys and men were taught to become feminized. The After the feminists took over the legislative process, they promised the gay community that they too would be their standard bearers. So the gay community also came in, and that's when you started talking about all these rainbow genders, and you can't speak a certain way. Everything began to become feelings, facts. I mean, feelings over facts, so to speak.
Mm.
So with feminism now, you're seeing a lot of girls reaching 30 years of age, 35 years of age, and because they pursued what men would pursue, and they've got their CEO, classifications and so forth. What happens now is they say, well, listen, I've got my degree, I've got my home, I got my own car, I pay my own bills. Men don't care about that. You understand? And women don't. Women are looking at relationships the way they think we should look at relationships, and now they're coming to their own conclusions and understanding that wait a minute now, just because you have achieved the things that men achieve in order to create families, you really think that we're impressed by that? We're not, because men are the ones that's supposed to create families. Women don't. They go into these serious, what they call equal opportunity uh, fields, and they go there for themselves. Women do not go into higher education for more higher jobs, higher paying jobs to start families. They don't. It's all for them and themselves, because you go, girl, you're independent, you don't need no man, and you've been fed that crap for the longest period of time. And now when the time comes, during the times when you're supposed to be having children, which is usually from 18 till about 24, 25, that is your highest peak time. That is your most desirable time, and so forth. But then they have convinced you that that's the time you go for a career. But here, the etymological origins of the word career is combat. Okay?
Mm.
The original meaning of career came from the word combat. So you essentially now on the front lines of combat, you're saying, where are all the good men? Well, usually you have a top tier choice. You want the top tier choice of men. But you've been kicking to the curb the men that would be the good men that would have helped you in the future. You see, it's like this, and I'll wrap this part up.
Yes,
Young
sir.
men, young men don't understand that from the time you're 18 years of age, going into your 25th year, you're not at the level where most of the women believe you should be to take care of them. They want you with the six figures, the six apps, the six this and six that, 6 foot, and so forth. They have these incredible demands on you. But you see, men age like wine. Young boys age like wine. We take time to develop our skills, and which is why I recommend young men from last 35 years, you go for yourself, you build your resources, because it's at the 35 that's when you begin to peak. 35 and 40, that's when your monies come in. That's when you are actually worth what you were built in to be. Women's die off very quickly, but they've been convinced that they can wait till 30, like men, and now they're beginning to see that the consequences is what they used to call the wall. They hit the wall, and they wonder now, what are they going to do? They're childless. Some of them do have children, but they don't have that companionship. I say there's an equation. There's a power equation. Men give up power. Men give up love for power. Women give up power for love. And women don't want love anymore. They want power. They want men's power. You see.
This is we're bringing in smart black people like Dr. Phil Valentine. He puts it out very eloquently. It's if you can't understand that, I don't know what else to tell you. Once again, we're talking to Dr. Phil Valentine. Be sure to hit the thumbs up button, like, share, subscribe. Now, Dr. Valentine, sticking to that, to this feminine movement, to what the relationships between men and women. I also heard you speak about, and I would like for you to, if you can, summarize the feminizing of men. Like you spoke about it a little bit in the school aspect, but I heard you say how sometimes because of what's being pushed, it's almost easier for men to act like women. If you understand what I'm saying, what do you mean by that? I heard you say that once, and I'd like for you to expand upon that.
Well, in my book, The Wounded Womb, I was one of the pupils of Dr. Neely Fuller.
Mm-hmm.
And Dr. Neely Fuller was actually the mentor to Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. And we did a gathering of the masters in Atlanta with him. And there he spoke, and this was in 2006.
Mm-hmm.
And even before that, he said, you watch, in 10 years, they will have men walking around in women's skirts, dressed like women. And we said, oh, Doc, you're kidding me. No, you will see men walking around in skirts because the society is going to become so feminized. And racism essentially is going to use it as a tool where, well, what they call racist white supremacy. He wrote that particular way that White supremacy worked its way into society and created the society where it is. And of course, there's a backlash against that now because the so called woke community came up. And now there is an attack against that because the people who are pushing the woke community were actually working for the oppressors. So it was Soros, it was Bloomberg, Rockefeller, Rothschild who funded Black Lives Matter.
Say it one more time. I don't mean to cut you off, but say those names one more time and I'll let you continue.
Okay, there's Soros,
Mm-hmm.
Rockefeller, Bloomberg, and Rothschilds because the Rothschilds, Soros works for the Rothschilds. So
Mm-hmm.
they're the ones who wanted to essentially create a bulwark to start the division. So what they did
Mm.
was they elevated this particular Marxist group, which was called Black Lives Matter, and they put them together with Antifa, which essentially was a group that came out of Nazi Germany themselves. They had the flag of Nazi Germany, which was dealing with just simply disruption of the order, so that they could essentially become the tool of the new Democratic Party that came up, which was the Socialist Democratic Party. And so socialism became the bulwark against republicanism, which was our own creation. We, the indigenous people, created the government that became infiltrated, and the constitution we created, which was the de jure constitution, that had the 48 states. Our flag had the six-pointed star, not the five-pointed star that was
Mm-hmm.
changed by the Pope. So what I was saying to you is that they created, they usurped the so-called black narrative of racism, and that gave excuses to all of the young providers on YouTube and so forth to come out and say that everything that they came up with is woke. And yeah, we're not the ones that run Hollywood. We don't run the education system. So everything that is pushing out there as woke is not from us,
Mm-hmm.
created by us. This was the way that they wanted to make sure that our narrative would be subsumed by the narrative that was created by Black Lives Matter and therefore vilified, so nobody wants to listen to us. And you have these other idiots, what's his name? He's on there. What his name is, but he's there trashing. He has a lot of money, a lot of followers. He is there trashing the so-called woke movement and saying that racism doesn't exist, and pretty much talking that racism no longer exists.
There's a
And
bunch of folks like that, but I wish I could figure out who you're talking about.
yeah, and and so his name might come up in my brain because I
You
don't.
talking about like Jesse Lee Peterson or
No, no, I think he's Jewish. He's
okay. Oh, okay.
I forgot his name, but he's very very well known. He's invited to many of, very articulate, fast talking, but nobody challenges what he says.
Mm.
You see, and a lot of it is dismissed, like racism is dismissed as if it doesn't exist anymore. It evaporated all of a sudden, um, since there was this new quickening. Now, I'm not trashing, the so-called movement where we want to get back to our Republican state,
Mm-hmm.
but what is happening is that what we want to speak about is no longer a topic. It's dismissed. It says it's on you now. Whatever it is that's wrong with you and the society, it's you. And they're putting it back again. It's like they've reversed it. And whatever we want to talk about race, they can call it woke. They can call it that projection. They can call it everything. And so now we can't actually discuss how the education system is racist, how the
Mm.
entire society that we're looking at with in every corner, education, the same way that Dr. Neely Fuller stated. Everyone, white supremacy is in everything we deal with: religion, education, entertainment, throughout the entire society. But it is so subtle now because we got a few little black faces in there now. It don't look like racism anymore. It's not projected as racism because it's all about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. You have all the trouble, and then when you throw in that thing about sexism and the transgender, and everybody's now hopping on our civil rights that we supposedly had created, the avenue for our way of dealing with. Instead of human rights, they gave us civil rights. And so now they're using that to weaponize that
Mm.
and to say that we can't say certain things against certain people who we know are going to be toxic to our community.
Absolutely, absolutely. Once again, we're talking to Dr. Phil Valentine. This is Dr. Phil Valentine. Be sure to share this broadcast, like, share, subscribe. Now, Dr. Valentine, I want to ask you're considered one of the leading founders or the founders of the conscious movement. You're someone, like you said, you spoke about these things over 35 years ago. Just from then, when you were one of the founders or the first people to speak on these issues up until now, how do you believe our the conscious movement has progressed, and what are some of the things you like, but what are also some of the things you may not like, and what are ways that we can continue to move forward?
That's a good question. Well, I I saw it get a turn to the worse when we began to get into this debating one another.
Mm.
Usually, I try to teach the fact that debating had a purpose, because at the end of debates, the two people who were opposing one another for the issues would come together with the best facts from one side and the best facts from the other side, then come together and create a coalition so that whatever it is that was arrived at through that discourse would then be something that we would use as policies to better our community. Instead, the debating took on this adversarial thing where certain groups of people would then debate their particular philosophies, which almost came down to blows and even violence, gun violence. So
Wow.
that took a whole turn from what it is that we learned at the feet of our mentors like Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, Dr. Van Sertima, and Dr. Otis Wilson. We ourselves, Amos Wilson, I'm sorry. Um, I met Otis Wilson, who played for the Bears.
Yeah. I was gonna say that.
Yeah, I met Otis when he was about to go to the Bears when he had just got drafted. But anyway, that's a whole other story. So the main thing is that the conscious community, again, at the beginning, it was underground, which means it didn't go seeking validation from the pop cultures. It was a place that you could go and learn about things that they did not speak about, teach about, and so forth. And you would come away with a greater knowledge about what was really going on in your community and around the world. But it got subsumed or at least co opted by some young people who came in and saw that it had a popular following and they wanted their own soapbox and 15 minutes of fame. Some of them, which we knew, were really powerful. And myself and other brothers like Bobby and so forth, we passed the torch to them. But then there were those who began to take advantage of that type of attention and began to take money from that community. And so when they began to speak on certain things based upon what they dealt with, like it became like a gang culture. You know, you were red or you were blue or you were yellow, you were green or whatever it is,
Hmm.
and these factions would be battling one another, and that's supposed to have been uplifting our community. And I told people it didn't, and it didn't. So what we did was essentially I created, well, a long time ago, back in when I was in New York, we created the university, but we created the first university online in 2005. It was before that there was no such thing as a university online,
Mm.
a higher university online, and we were bringing in people from all around the world. Now you'll see that some of these higher universities are actually asking for the same tuition monthly that we put out back in the day in 2005 and 2006 when we began the University of Commission Sciences. We then, 10 years ago or 12 years ago, I think it was 10 years ago, we began the Institute for Self Mastery, which was an online homeschool for children between K and 12.
Hmm.
So we were busy, you know, doing the things that we want, like the Panthers were doing in their community, you know, quietly for us until they saw that it was actually working, and then they would send these agents or agent provocateurs or people that essentially came in there to disrupt, like they would come in to disrupt your line, your thread,
Hmm.
because of something I've said. Well, they were doing that at these places, and they were challenging. They shut me down at one point when I was lecturing at the university, at the Long Island University, and that disrupted. I had about 300 people. This one person was yelling at the back with two other people and so forth, and they had to dismiss everyone there. So there
Wow.
was a concerted effort to undermine what was being revealed. Now, a lot of what we were saying seemed like myth, and it was conjecture, and we were people thought that we were actually just doing it for our own edification.
Hmm.
No, we weren't. We were doing something so new that nobody recognized what it was. It was from the future. So, and they're saying, "Well, this we don't know what this is." Now everybody's on board. I don't mind it, but I'm saying, it was a hard road to actually come to. It really taxed a lot of us, and I feel that my compadres like Dr. Blair, and my beloved brother Bobby Hemmett, they kind of fell. They were warriors that fell, and it seems like myself and maybe Brother Jamal and Black Dot and a lot of the other brothers from that particular bring A. Rashid and other good brothers from
Hmm.
that, our young people, they're the ones that are still holding up the standard.
Absolutely. Once again, we're talking to Dr. Phil Valentine. Be sure to hit the thumbs up button, like, share, subscribe. Now, Dr. Valentine, I definitely can't get you out of here without talking about health. You spoke about, your exemptions that you give out. I asked what, because I'm going to ask you some questions, but with the internet, the way the internet is, the V word, it tends to throw off the broadcast at times. So just, if we can stay away from the V word when it comes to the jab and stuff like that, that's all I ask. But I do want to ask you about the lack of promotion of good health in diets versus just jabs and going to get these jabs and doing all these things. What is that about, and why is it being mass marketed to our community?
Well, it's actually mass marketed to our community because we are the ones least being vaccinated right now.
Mm-hmm.
Most people think that we're the ones that's giving up our arms easily. We're not. We got the Tuskegee protocol that still runs in our culture. So we're a little bit more recalcitrant to actually approach this nonsense. But a lot of us are still going ahead and getting it. This jab is essentially a kill protocol.
Mm.
We're not going to see it until 2022, 2023. There is a moratorium on life after the jab. There is
Wow.
a shortening of life, and most people are saying, "Well, nothing happened to me." Well, see what they're doing. They're very slick about it. They're giving some of us, at least a percentage of us, the what they call the neutral, or what they're not giving the actual jab that has the contents, the kill contents. Okay, so what they're doing is they have a percentage, a large percentage getting the vaccination, and I know that I'm hoping that you don't get pulled off of whatever it is you are, but I have to speak in code.
Yes, sir.
There are a lot of us that are no longer waking up.
Mm.
Most people don't know that. There's a lot of people who are falling ill, and the hospitals are filled with the people who are jabbed.
Mm.
Okay, so we know that if if the so-called COVID is actually what it says it is, then there is a country there, or a state called Gibraltar over there in the east. They have 100% of the population has been vaxxed, and they still have 54% COVID.
Mm.
So it's not, they have not isolated the SARS. No one has. In fact, what they are supposedly creating came from a computer markup. So
Mm.
what happened? Here's what they did. They fed everything that they knew a human being would represent. In other words, from your atomic structure all the way out to your hair follicles. They fed everything about a human being into the AI. Okay, that's very important you understand that. The AI is the artificial intelligence that is
Mm-hmm.
now we're all plugged into. That's what COVID 19 means. COVID is Certificate of Vax ID, identification. COVID. And that's why they want you to have your card. That's why they want to have you registered. Do you have this? You have to have this before you get into the what do you call it? Who get on a plane? It's certificate of vax identification (ID). The 19 is one, which equals A, and nine, which equals I. So it's certificate of that identification using AI. It ain't got nothing to do with the SARS. Okay, so now they have you taking this thing that is not a vaccination. Clinically and legally, they cannot call it a vaccination. It is still an experiment. They have never used it before because they use genetics. And remember, when they fed all that information about a human being into the AI, they said then, how do we undermine and destroy this particular organism, which is the human body? The AI kicked out the spike protein. And
Wow.
the what you have is graphene. They keep talking about the graphene nanoparticle graphene, but it's not just the graphene. It's more than that. The graphene is a toxic material called what is it again? Nanoparticle uh, graphene something, but it's in the vax right now, and that's what's causing athletes to drop dead on the field all over. They have film now of a tennis player. They're playing tennis. All of a sudden, he gets the hit, and he was about to volley back, get back a volley, and drops dead. Another football player is in the huddle, and he's getting his instructions, falls back dead. There's a woman on a podium about to speak, drops dead. There are people dropping dead in public all over the world right now, and that's being kept from the public.
Wow. Wow, wow, Doctor Phil, Doctor Valentine. I'm not even gonna lie. That kind of blew my mind, and I know I'm not the only one in the audience right now who is just stunned by the way. Like when you were saying the numbers, I was counting it up. It equaled I. Obviously A is the first letter. You broke down what the letters in each in the word meant. I mean that is astounding. That is incredible to when you really think about what's taking place in our world and what's taking place out there right now is just truly incredible. Make sure you all connect with Dr. Phil Valentine right there at his website. It's Metaphysics right there. Now, Dr. Valentine, I want to ask you about the rise, I will say, of holistic health. What are your thoughts about the holistic health, what's taking place, and how that actually is way more beneficial to our community, the Black community, than what's being mass promoted and mass marketed?
Well, we've been doing this for, like I said, nearly 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I've been doing this before some people were born.
Me included. Yes, sir.
So, now that I'm 70 in my 70s, it's very good to see that it's becoming more and um, more and more acceptable. Back in the day, it was actually a kind of a challenge. See, I've met with Fauci before.
Mm.
I had a run in with Fauci before. That was back in the 1970s, going into the 80s. It was about 1985 when they began to make the announcement in 1984 about HIV and AIDS.
Mm-hmm.
That's when in 85 I stepped forward and took a platform to say that HIV causing AIDS is a hoax. Well, of course,
Wow.
when I began to show why it was a hoax, um, a lot of the people that I had access to, like in radio stations and different platforms, completely said no. This is what they say. The master said this is what causes it. Boom. But it was about maybe 5 or 6 years from then, after I created something called the Gathering of the Masters, and we began to tell the people who were interested in knowing more about it. We began to show them the truth. They began to spread the knowledge, which we were very thankful for. Excuse me, there's a lot of noise going on outside. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So what you have was at that time up in Harlem, um, I was together with um, a, a place that was called the what is it? It was called the University at the corner of Lenox Avenue. It's called the Tree of Life.
Mm-hmm.
And the Tree of Life was a place where I actually started to become more invested in my health because I did have a condition at the time that I was seeking to help myself to get rid of. And when I began to study there, because he had all the great books, all the esoteric books, all the books that were banned, and so forth. So I studied there, and we eventually got together. I eventually got together with a woman named Queen Afua, and we put together something called the Sacred Woman. And so we began to teach something called the so-called natural fasting. So we did fasting and purification, and we began to help sisters get rid of their fibroid tumors, excessive bleeding from their menstrual cycles.
Mm-hmm.
We're dealing with people with diabetes and so forth, and we were truly healing, helping people to heal because we weren't the healers. The Most High was the healer.
Mm-hmm.
And what we did was just facilitate them to do the right thing. And so after that, it began to grow, and more consciousness began to go out into the community. And this was not just in our community. We were some of the people that were the forerunners into the Black community, but the white community, the Asian community, they all had their doctors of naturopathic medicine. We
Mm-hmm.
didn't have that at the time at the level that they did. So we were the ones that began to really get into it and teach it from the soapbox that we had created on Nostrand Avenue in Brooklyn first. And then I went on to WLIB in New York, and we were syndicated across Bob Law's show that went national. And so it began to become more of a conscious movement. And that's when I started my metaphysical schools back then. And we, we began to teach the people how to think um, differently, not what to think, but how to think. And so the Most High began to guide us. And I would say about 40 years we've been doing this. And I'm the proud godfather of 35 children
Wow.
from couples who said that the doctor said, you can't have children. Well, we proved them wrong. And I'm just happy to have helped bring back some of the ancestors.
Absolutely, absolutely. Once again, we're talking to Dr. Phil Valentine. You can connect with Dr. Phil Valentine right here at his website. Dr. Valentine, I don't want to hold you all night, but I just love hearing you speak. I love asking these questions. We had some comments earlier, and they wanted to ask you about Kwanzaa. I'm curious to your thoughts on Kwanzaa. We had a couple of people asking about Kwanzaa. Is that something you want to speak to?
Well, I would just make one little sentence on it. My mentor, Dr. John Henry Clark, said that you can't, in the Bible it says you can't bring a clean thing out of an unclean thing.
Mm,
He says that we had hundreds, maybe thousands of different things that would have celebrated exactly what Kwanzaa celebrated, but the person who put it together was actually an FBI informant.
mm,
So he created it um, from um, from out of a basement in California, and that particular organization, United Slaves, became the antithesis or the bulwark against the Panthers.
mm.
Dr. John Henry Clark came out and told me, as one of the people who was mentors, I had to follow through. Now, again, I'm not here to fight with anybody. I'm telling you what the deal is that you could go back and check for yourself. Okay, the person who created it, Kwanzaa, was an FBI agent who was working with some of the some of those people that actually helped to destroy a lot of the so-called black organizations that are out
Wow.
there. So I don't celebrate Kwanzaa. I respect brothers who and sisters who do that because they use it as a tool. But no, I don't follow through with it. I would give respects to the brothers and sisters who do. But like I said in the Bible, based on what my mentor quoted, I think it was it Job 14:4, who can bring it was Job, or I don't know which one it was, but who can bring a clean thing out of an unclean? Not one.
Wow.